Welcome back to Stacy on right here on SiriusXM's Patriot channel. Thank you for being with us tonight. And I want to start off with who's joining us. We have returning to the show Alexander William Salter, Georgie G. Snyder, Associate Professor of Economics in the Rawls College of Business and the Comparative Economics Research Fellow with the Free Market Institute, both at Texas Tech University. Thank you for coming on tonight.
It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. So we have President Biden continuing his assault on the oil and natural gas industry, and he feels justified now because of the midterm election.
Unfortunately, that seems to be the case. At a time of very high geopolitical instability, the energy policies embraced by this administration have not been a boon to Americans. And you're getting a lot of rhetoric from the White House that what's going on with oil prices is about, quote-unquote, corporate greed. But if you look at the economics of the situation, it's much simpler than that. It all comes down to supply and demand, and the president's policies really aren't helping.
So aren't helping is like maybe that's when he first took office, but now I feel like he's actually taking active steps that are detrimental to the oil and gas industry.
There's lots of things that the administration has done that is actively hurting the oil and gas industry, and these have gone almost to day one. And you could even say that it started on day one when the president signed the executive order basically halting the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline. Since then, there have been multiple new executive orders, multiple regulations, fees, other barriers to production. All of these are basically driving up domestic production costs, and those costs are rising even faster than inflation. So we shouldn't be surprised that what we're observing domestically is the rebound in oil production following COVID simply hasn't been that strong. We can and must do better. But companies are going to respond to market forces, and right now they're getting the lesson that the administration is not in their corner. In fact, if anything, the administration is against them. And so they're responding by not investing in new capacity, and that's basically making energy more expensive than it otherwise would be.
So he blames them for this. He literally blames them for the higher oil prices. But is it completely in their control? Because I think that's one of the things that people are kind of struggling with. Are the oil and natural gas companies profiting off of our misery, or are they responding to market forces in a way that is only natural and so therefore not really their fault?
It's easy to make a scapegoat out of big companies, especially big oil companies, big energy companies. But the truth is oil is produced and sold in a market, and that market is global. And so what's going on is a matter of supply and demand. It's not corporate greed. What we're observing is that prices are going up because quantities produced and sold are flagging. And this is a good for which consumers are not very sensitive to changes in price, right? When oil prices go up, when energy prices go up, yeah, consumers will scale back somewhat, but there aren't a lot of good substitutes for fossil fuels, so you can't afford to reduce your consumption all that much, which means that quantities are going to fall and prices are going to rise, but the price hike effect more than outweighs the quantity effect. The end result is more revenue, actually, increased total revenues for oil companies. Again, this is just a straightforward matter of supply and demand, and to the extent that there are problems on the supply side, a lot of these have a regulatory origin. We could get quantities higher and prices lower if the administration eased up on its restrictive energy policies.
So they've said numerous times from the White House press briefing room, Karine Jean-Pierre, anybody who can get behind the podium, they'll say, oh, there's 7,500 oil and natural gas permits, and none of them are being developed, and so therefore we don't need to issue any more. And then President Biden will tell a teenager angrily at a rally who's, or at a speaking event where he is, they're saying, you're allowing new permits. And he says, no new permits, no new oil permits, no new drilling off of our land. There will be no new drilling. This is a man who rides around in a motorized beast, that's the nickname of it, that runs on fossil fuel. So it's like listening to a crazy person rant. He is responsible for this, but how much longer can we do it? How much longer can we last, I should say?
This is obviously something that we want to get away from as fast as possible. politically, I don't think that that's going to happen. I think the administration is committed to hampering the energy industry because of their political goals. And so this is going to be something that really hurts the wallets of Americans for a while, longer yet. And as we said at the beginning, the geopolitical circumstances of what's going on right now doesn't make this easy. It's kind of silly that the administration is hampering domestic energy production, talking about damages to the environment. At the same time, it's courting dictatorial regimes in Venezuela, in the Middle East, to try and step up oil production when their production technology is not as efficient as ours. In fact, they produce and refine oil in broadly dirtier fashions that we do for the environment. But the difference is, if it's produced here, the president doesn't incur a domestic political cost associated with his own base. So it's all for show. And ultimately, it's something that rebounds to the harm of American households and American consumers.
And that harm is playing out in every way because we have skyrocketing costs. And like if you look at healthcare, the costs are up. If you look at energy, costs are up. Grocery stores, staples, costs are up. Energy costs in your home, those are up, as well as the cost to fuel your vehicle. Or if you are driving a truck across this country, it is, it's almost like you have to park your truck. You can't afford to carry a load from the point of origin to destination because you can't afford to pay for it up front and be reimbursed afterwards. It's just too expensive. So the impacts here continue to snowball, yet we see Biden crowing and saying, kind of bragging that he now has the right to do pretty much anything he wants because of the midterm results.
And it's worth keeping in mind that all those price hikes that you just mentioned are going to disproportionately hurt American families on the lower end of the income distribution. Whenever prices go up, especially for goods like energy or food or shelter, as has been happening for the last 2 years, that's going to really fall the hardest on those with smaller budgets. And so it's kind of unfortunate that the president of the party who claims to be a champion of the underprivileged is actually the one laying the heaviest burdens on their shoulders.
Heaviest burdens and with the least accountability. So talk to us about what could happen in the next couple of years. I saw stories saying that in the Northeast they were running out of diesel fuel, but the trucks are still running, groceries are still being delivered to stores, and so Americans can afford to still ignore an upcoming diesel shortage. But what's actually going to happen?
I think the story is one of sclerosis rather than crisis. I don't think that there's going to be an acute instant where everything just falls apart. I think this is going to be a continued case of Americans getting slowly squeezed by higher prices and scarcer essential goods, including for energy, for oil, than otherwise needs to be the case. Just because the house of cards is not going to come falling down doesn't mean we're in good shape. This is going to hurt for a couple of years longer, and we have to hope that eventually we can get an administration that understands the needs of the American people.
Yeah, so the slow squeeze is possibly not painful enough to get younger voters who broke for the Democrats plus 28. It was kind of shocking how many younger Gen Z voters ignored their wallets and everything else that was going on and strictly voted on the issue of abortion. So they're going to slow up any kind of backlash that could actually occur over how difficult it is for the families you were just discussing.
This is a time when the opposition really needs to make a principled, positive argument for why things like a robust energy sector and all those other policies that you mentioned are important for a flourishing economy and a flourishing society. We can't just have this defensive crouch mentality where we're going to say there's not anything that we can do to stop these policies, we're just going to have to take it. We need to make the case to the American people that when it comes to energy, we have the capacity to produce more. We have the ability to get quantities produced up and prices down. It's a matter of making sure that we get the most counterproductive regulations out of the way, get Washington, D.C. out of the way, and let American companies do what they do best.
Yep, we've got to do it. I'm so glad that you could join us again today. All of the things that you've shared with us have been extraordinarily enlightening in the face of what has just been an energy crisis since President Biden's first day. Like, we've literally never seen anything like this in the modern era. people are now going back to talking about the Carter years and the inflation and the lines to buy gas and things like that. I never thought we'd get back here because we just have so many natural resources. We never have to experience this. It's completely man-made.
Everything old is new again, unfortunately. Apparently, we have to relearn the lessons of history. Even though we thought that we had already taken our lumps, they're coming again, and we're just going to have to keep on understanding that the path that we're taking right now, like 40 years ago, 45 years ago, is not the path to prosperity. It's the path to stagnation, and we can't afford that.
We can't afford it. Thank you so much. Alexander William Salter, Georgie G. Snyder, Associate Professor of Economics at Texas Tech University. Thanks for coming on again tonight. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Good night.